Now the piece you've all been waiting for. I'm delighted to have three students with us today. I'm going to ask them a couple of questions, ask them to talk about some experiences that they've had. As you know, and as you are learning more today, we try very hard to foster and maintain a welcoming and inclusive campus community here at TU, where everybody can thrive and everybody can succeed. And so in support of that goal, I think it's important that we hear from students. It's helpful to be informed by their experiences, both positive and negative, I might point out. And in particular, given today's conference theme, experiences related to discussions of controversial topics that they may have come across in classrooms with you. So I'm going to ask each of these three, first of all, to introduce themselves, but I'm going to ask them, having done that, if they would be willing to share one or two classroom experiences that have had significant impact on them and on their educational experiences here at TU. So, Rochelle, can we start with you introducing yourself? Absolutely. And then Mac, and then Erik, and then I'll ask you perhaps to start with a couple of your experiences.
Hello, everyone. My name is Rochelle Ford. I am a junior and political science major here at Towson. If I could think of one or two significant experiences that have had a positive impact on my classes here at Towson, I go to one of my classes that I had this past fall semester, which was in the political science major. My professor asked us to create a presentation on an issue that we could suggest new policies for. One student did his project on gun control, and we can all imagine how heated that can be, how heated of a topic that can be, and controversial as well. So as the student was taking questions after his presentation, we all suggested, new suggestions for his policies that he had created. And it kind of got heated in the discussion that we were having. And so the student was going back and forth defending his policies and how they could work in today's government on a federal level. However, as we were going back and forth, the professor kind of stepped back. She was sitting in the desk, at a desk with us in the classroom, so it was kind of like she was a student with us. She didn't say anything, but it was like meaningful just to have that representation from a professor as like a student on a student level. And so we were able to have back and forth conversations and a discussion with this student, and I could see that he changed his views on the policies he had suggested. And so it was a very good conversation that we had. And after the conversation, I saw the student, we were walking the same direction to the union after class. And he suggested to me that he wanted to look more into the issue and to have more of a better look from another perspective than he had before going in to the presentation. So he explained to me that before he conducted his research, that he already had a preconceived notion that gun control was something that he could, have a meaningful position to or for. So he explained to me that he wanted to look more into the discussion. We had both commended the professor for sitting at a desk with us and allowing us to have these back and forth conversations that weren't attacks, but rather just educated perspective, guidance to the student to suggest that he look into gun control again. So.
Thank you. Do you have a negative experience that you would like to share or be willing to share? You may not like to share it, but would you be willing to share it?
Yes. So my sophomore year, fall, whenever Trump was elected. So
a memorable moment.
That was fall, yeah, fall. So, sophomore year, I was taking a class for my poli-sci major, and the professor did not ask us what we thought about what happened the night before. He just went into the lesson. And so in the lesson, a student raised his hand and related something that the teacher was teaching to us to the previous night in Trump's election. And obviously the student was in support of President Trump. However, other students were not, and it was clear. So after the student said something in support of Trump, the whole entire class raised their hand. And it was more like the class demographics were more, I guess, minority than the standard, white student, male student. And so when they all raised their hands and when we raised our hands to say something, the teacher kind of shut it down and started tone policing us, saying, we're going to have this conversation as adults, as students who want to learn, etc. And so for me, I've had a lot of tone policing experiences in the classrooms where I guess professors are more focused on how my tone is rather than how the message is. And I think as a minority student here at Towson, professors should probably, they should kind of be more sympathetic to minority students, because our messages and our experiences and how we learn at Towson is impacted for what we experience, or from what we experience in our everyday lives. And so after the election, it was hard coming to school and coming to learn and coming to focus, especially when it was such a hard environment here on campus. And so the whole experience with me being tone policed and the minority students in this classroom being tone policed by their professor was kind of a shock to me, and kind of made me not want to focus in that class. And so my performance in that class it still turned out okay. I still got an A. However, it was just, I didn't want to come to that class anymore. So.
Thank you for sharing that. And the notion of tone policing was mentioned this morning, and I suspect we will come back to it again. I think it's something that's very important for us to focus on. Mac, please introduce yourself, and maybe you'd be willing to give us a couple of examples.
My name is Mac Haight. I'm an exercise science student, senior. So I'll start with the positive, and I want to say that the positive isn't, I don't have a direct story for positive. It's just been an overall great experience with a majority of my professors. And for the negative, I have one story in particular. It was during the election. I also can't remember what semester it was, because it feels like every class just blurs into one giant semester.
Is that good or bad?
That's very
Don't answer that.
It's a good thing, but a bad thing, because I just feel like I've been writing papers since I was about 12.
Yeah.
But I was taking a course. It was a core class. It was Feminism in America. And I'm a very open-minded individual. I will let anybody speak their opinion to me, and I'm not going to judge anyone based on that opinion. It was, I want to say, one of the second or third class of the semester, and it was an 8 a.m., so it was already tough to go to. But I walked in, and on the board, the whiteboard, was white supremacy on one side and Donald Trump on the other. My political views in this part of the country don't really match with everybody else's. I did vote for Donald Trump. That's just my political views. That's how I was raised. And that did not agree with the professor at all. What I thought I was going to learn in the class was about feminism and how that was impacted throughout America's history. And obviously there is a political aspect to that, and I would love to learn about that, but I did not learn about that at all. That entire semester, especially that one class, she went on to speak about how white supremacy throughout the history of the U.S. impacted feminism, and she directly correlated that to how Donald Trump acts and how he acted towards women while he was during his election. And my issue with that is not what I signed up to learn. Now, I understand that it was relevant. It was what was going on in the U.S. at the time. I did not sign up to learn my professor's political opinions. I signed up to learn about feminism. And her opinions did not match with mine, and that's fine. But that's something we could have talked about outside of class or after class hours. She was there to teach me about that specific topic that I signed up for, and she did not.
Thank you very much, Mac. The issues of academic freedom, freedom of speech, and when faculty members are speaking as individuals and when they're speaking as representatives of the institution, all of these are difficult issues that we grapple with on a regular basis. Thank you for bringing that to our attention. And finally, in this first round, Erik, would you introduce yourself, please, and perhaps give us a couple of examples?
Hi, my name's Erik Gagen. I'm a senior psychology major, and I have had both negative and positive experiences, but to start with a positive, since I was one of the only students on this panel to partake in the intergroup dialogue, I felt that it was actually a very beautiful thing to see people from different perspectives come together, because throughout my life, the way that I've learned is being in the same place with other people and learning that we are all human. We all do have our unique experiences, and that we're not just representatives of some minority or stereotype or whatever another's preconceived notions upon us are. So the IGD experience, I did think was a beautiful thing. To briefly share another experience that was positive, I had a professor say something that could be interpreted as racist last year, and what he said was, I think Black Lives Matter, that they're overreacting, and the fact that he was aware of it, and I did speak to him after class, and seeing that a professor was willing to stand in front of the class and say, just let's talk about this, tell me what happened, and that he was also receptive to listening to me and both my personal experiences with, it was more so related to the police and prison industrial complex, but that he did stand in front of his class and admit that he had said something that, for lack of a better word, was wrong. And I guess to share a negative experience based around this topic was when I was seated in a classroom and I heard the words that all white people are racist. And although I understand that based upon the theory of racial development, that's the theory that's being presented from an intellectual perspective, and I can agree with, if that's the theory, let's learn it. But for me, I first think that is highly divisive, and it's also destructive, because, I mean, strictly in my opinion, that if you were to say something like that, those people that are more moderate, that do not completely concur with you, you're destroying any possibility of them doing so.
Thank you very much. As sort of follow-up to each of your examples, would you be willing to share with us perhaps how you think, in the case of your negative examples, a faculty member, professor might do something differently? What actions do you think they might have taken that might have changed that? Are there some things that you would recommend to them with regard to that? Rochelle, you want to start?
Sure. I think looking back, learning is more meaningful when conversations are more meaningful. So I think that professors should be more open to, I guess, guide their learning, guide their teaching with the standpoint that every student is bringing something different to the table with identities and their backgrounds. And so it's important for students to come to class expecting to learn, but also expecting to talk. And because we can learn from other people's, I guess, standpoints and perspectives on different issues. And so I think it would be good if professors would, set aside, 5 to 7 minutes of class after, some major event, or even just every day when that class starts, just asking students, how are you feeling today? And I guess this would provide students with the guide way of just explaining, how they feel, explaining, what's going on in the world that's affecting them and what might affect them in that class that day. And so if professors, don't want to do this or is not open to doing this, I think it'd be also a good idea to just allow professors to have projects that they give, at the end of the semester during finals week that students can relate to current events. So, have professors always, ask students to relate, how this can, I guess, impact you in your future or in everyday life, and having a question that could just say, how can you apply this topic to the political world, political sphere, or just in everyday life. It would help students really, I guess, take a step back and actually apply their knowledge to what they're learning in class and apply that to how it can help the world and the country in general. And so because every student is coming in with different identities and different backgrounds, I think it's important to have relevant conversations that can impact the class overall and not just having them just answer random questions every day. And so having the opportunity to really express how you feel coming into that class that day, because it might be a harder day for me as a female than it is that day for a male, or as a Black woman in America as it is the latter. So it's just, I feel like it's really important for professors to really take a step back and actually examine who's in that classroom, because their ways of teaching and their ways of wanting the students can learn to learn can really impact all the students in the class.
Thank you very much. Mac, what about for you and the negative experience and how that might be changed?
So I think the best way for a student to learn is through active learning. So the professor provides the information, and it's the student's job to take that information and apply it to the world. And if a student doesn't want to learn, they're not going to learn. It's their job. They have to have the will to learn. So in my opinion, to fix my negative experience, or just the best classroom experience would be for just a teacher or a professor to provide the information on the course that doesn't have their opinions directly related to it. I just want all of the facts, and then for me to take that information and apply it how I want to form my own opinion. And if they want to have a discussion like she recommended, 5 to 10 minutes at the end or beginning of each class to have every student express their opinion, because not everybody knows everything, and the kid next to me might know more than me. And to hear other opinions, that would help shape my own. So I would think that any form of active learning with open discussion would be the best way.
Thank you. And Erik?
As I told the previous professor that I brought up who made the comment about Black Lives Matter, I think the professors need to understand and remain cognizant of the fact that there is a power differential in existence with students, and that although I am one to agree with free speech, probably more so than most, you do have to be aware that you're representing the university. And also I feel if these types of things do need to be addressed in an academic setting, that somewhat of emotional responses and feelings and things that could subject a person to individual attack or just negative consequences should either be omitted or flat out stated. And as I said, it's a good concept to teach diversity. It's a good concept for there to be varying opinions, but something I agree with more than anything is without honest discourse, there is no discourse. It's just noise.
Are there any specific examples? You've given some. Can you think of others that you would want faculty members to know that you have found to be particularly helpful in your classroom experiences, that you would encourage others perhaps to employ, that have helped build trust, that have helped make those difficult conversations easier? Are there some patterns of behavior that faculty members employ that you find particularly helpful and supportive?
I think in general, just having professors that are willing to have constructive conversations and conversations about controversial topics, because it's difficult learning when you know your professor may or may not disagree with something that is, I guess, something that you take passionately and something that you take to heart and something that affects you. So I think just having professors that are willing to learn as well as willing to teach. And so I think I would also say that a specific example would be just professors assigning assignments that, like I said, can be related to current events in general. So assigning like current events or assigning just something for extra credit in general, I think can help, whether or not it, I guess, relates to that course. You know, it might be a course in computer science or something, but you can still have something that, or work with students to have them learn outside of what that course is specifically teaching.
Mike?
Trying to think and how to relate this. So I had a course last semester actually, and I'm not trying to suck up to him, but he's in the room. And it was a course that taught us how to write papers, research papers, for grant proposals. And the best thing I liked about the course was that he taught us step by step how to do it. We had to constantly write sections of the papers that were, brutally murdered by his red pen. And the thing I liked most about the course was that he was with us there step by step. And on top of that, if we had any questions regarding anything, not even just course material, he was there to speak about everything after the class, and he always devoted time to each and every student. And that's actually how I'm up on the panel, is because we not only talked about the course material, but we ended up talking about everything that goes on in an everyday aspect of life. And so having a professor that is willing to speak their mind and listen to you speak your mind is basically what I would like to see in a professor. Yeah.
Thank you. Erik?
I'd like to preface this statement saying that the whole diversity issue is much larger than this campus. It's all of society, and we can only do our small part while sitting in classrooms, sitting at this place. But I think it's necessary to learn about the other side, even if we find it untasteful, we find it profoundly disgusting, because unless you learn about, I'm not going to say the opposition, but other people's opinions, you have no experience in forming any counter arguments. And it's also an issue of, if you're willing to listen to people, you can begin more so readily to change their opinions, because you can find something you concur on. and then just work from there. So if that could be more of like the thought process or the culture, that would be helpful.
Terrific, thank you. I'd like to open it up to you now to ask questions that are burning in your minds that you wish these three great young people to address. So please, yes, let's start over here. And since there's no mic, will you shout, and I will perhaps translate into English if that's necessary. And I say English meaning my English.
Hi, thank you very much for sharing your experiences. I was curious about the idea of, for all three of you, of what you signed up for when you engage with a discipline. Particularly, I think there can be a difference between what you think something is going to be about and what it actually is about. And sometimes you may think that something is unrelated, but it's actually an argument within the discipline as to whether or not that's unrelated. What do you do when you encounter a situation where what's asked of you in class feels uncomfortable or in opposition to your beliefs, but engaging with the material is part of the discipline? So you may be, no one's mentioned being in an art class. An integral part of being in an art class is receiving critique. But what if you're someone who has a strong personal conviction that the way that you're doing things already, for whatever reason, is the way that you were supposed to do them, the way that you need to do that? How do you square that with being at school, not only to get a job in the future, but to change your thinking?
I think I can answer that. What I signed up for specifically when enrolling at Towson is a liberal arts school, and a school that is open to having multiple conversations within a specific course, whether that directly relates or is kind of a stretch or not. So liberal arts to me is something where, or a place or a topic where I can actually express myself and have other students express themselves and bringing their backgrounds to the table without any necessary criticism or with criticism that can help us all in the future. And so for me, that's what I signed up with. I signed up for when enrolling at Towson. And so I think it's important, and I'm agreeing with you. Like you said, what if you're in an art class and you have a criticism and you're not a person that really accepts criticism? I think that we should all be open because this is what we signed up for as a liberal arts institution.
Go ahead.
So I strongly agree with criticism. I believe it's definitely a big aspect in universities. Going back to my story, the part that I had an issue with was that it felt like she was influencing our decision on the election that was coming up, which was definitely not part of the curriculum. And it wasn't specified that I was in a political science class. I was in a feminist class. That was my issue with the course. Now, if she, like we talked about earlier, if she wanted 5 to 10 minutes to talk about politics at the end of class, and she stated that that was her opinion and opened it up to our opinions, and I would have been all game to talk about politics. But that's not what I signed up for when I clicked the class on my blackboard. But criticism, yes, very, very welcome. Students, especially students, are not, the first time we try something, we're most likely wrong. And we that's what we're here for. We're here to learn. No, I understand. your option, then your options are to open your mind and listen to the professor. That's my opinion. Because if I joined a class and I didn't know what to expect, I didn't know what I was going to learn, or I knew what I was going to learn and I ended up being wrong, then it is my job to open up and hear the professor.
I think this issue of being presented with material that you may not agree with or that you're uncomfortable with, and your response to it is more so related to the individual and emotional maturity, and it is the ability to see both sides. But I also feel that if a person has been placed in a situation where they're that uncomfortable, where I don't want to use the word trauma because it gets thrown around too much, but there should be a way out. And I mean, it should be presented, especially when there are topics that are difficult to deal with, that could inflict some negative things upon a person. It should be presented on the first day. And obviously withdrawing is an option, not attending that particular class is an option. And yeah, it should be transparent.
Thank you.
Thank you. Other questions, please. Professor Vance.
This university puts a tremendous amount of importance on student evaluations of classes. You may not realize this, but many of your opinions immediately pursuant to the end of the class may change over 5 years, 10 years. Do you think that we should put such emphasis on student evaluations and ignore the fact that sometimes classes and professors are appreciated or depreciated 5, 10 years later?
For clarification, are you asking, should evaluations be, I guess, emphasized more or less?
It's within the context of the fact that immediately following a course, you may not know the long-term effects of that course. You may find in 5 or 10 years, let's say you had a negative reaction to a course. It's quite possible that in 5 or 10 years, you'll think to yourself, in having used much of what you learned in that course, this was a pretty valuable course. So I'm asking you, do you think so much emphasis should be put on student evaluations, and particularly in light of the fact that years later you may change your mind?
I don't think there's a great chance of a student changing their mind 5 to 10 years down the line because, for instance, even now, I don't really remember exactly how a course made me feel my first semester of my freshman year. And so I think evaluations are good to know, I guess good to assess how that student felt at that time. And so it's important to have good, to make students feel good and feel comfortable in a class at that time, no matter how old they are, no matter what their political standpoints are at that time. So I think that 5 to 10 years down the line, not to say it's irrelevant, but it's kind of it kind of puts a overglaze on a view of, should students change their views or change how they're evaluating a specific course, whether or not what that student felt at the time was relevant. So I think that kind of diverts the attention on, from what the student learned to how that student felt. And I think that how students feel is much more important sometimes because that can impact how they learn in the class. So I think that evaluations are, I guess, rated and emphasized how they should be.
I think she said that perfectly.
I think so far as evaluations are concerned, it does need to be emphasized that this is about how they taught, not what they were teaching. But also I do feel that giving thought to what the longitudinal effects of knowledge or things that we've learned here have upon us is something that's not been explored correctly or thoroughly. And I know I myself, things that I've learned years ago have come back and I have re-examined them. But honestly, there is no way to really examine the long-term effects unless you were actually to study it long-term. So it's take your best guess. And this is said commonly in the field of counseling. You plant seeds, you don't know which ones are going to sprout. So that's basically it. You can't tell. You can just try your best.
Great, thank you. Other questions? Wait time. Down the far end. Thank you.
My question is more related to maybe my personal experiences, and I need some, I would say, help from you guys. Towson University is diverse not just at the student level, but also at the faculty level. So you might be taking classes from professors who are not origins of America, but they are from diverse backgrounds as well. So I want to know some examples, maybe not, maybe direct, maybe you might have experienced directly, or maybe you might be in a class and you have friends who might have taken classes from professors outside of United States. How do they feel about those courses, and what advice would you give to us, to faculty who are from diverse backgrounds, to how to deal with some of those difficult conversations, not only just conversations, but also some of the things which faculty may not have experienced being in America for too long, but now they are bringing different perspectives from outside as well, but maybe students might not feel that is important for them.
I think the responsibility of diversity and as well as teaching diversity is to really put an emphasis on that in other courses. And so I think students will be more open to learning about diversity if they see that their professors that may be from the United States are open to teaching about diversity and teaching the importance of diversity. I don't think it should ever be an option whether or not diversity is important, because I think it's always important, because it's always going to affect how people are feeling in their everyday life or in their career in the future. So I think that conversations should be had in other classes, and I think that I guess improvements aren't going to be better unless other professors are on this or are on the same, I guess, are on the level of respecting diversity and respecting that, other faculty members may or may not be from the United States or may be a different race than them. I just think that in general, we should teach diversity and we should be engaged when it comes to diversity, because diversity isn't just, race, it's gender, it's, sexual orientation, et cetera, what have you. So I think that in general, I think it's the responsibility of professors to have an open mind when it comes to diversity, because this is a liberal arts institution and it is a growing diverse campus, and that's a really good thing, but it's not going to be a good thing unless we approach it as such, and we can't really avoid diversity because it's something that is going to affect each and every one of us, especially as this campus grows, as the country grows, and et cetera.
So I think diversity is a very controversial topic in the United States, especially in the political field, but also I do enjoy the fact that Towson is very diverse, the students and the professors. I've had many professors from outside of the country, and I have zero issues with that. But like she said, it's a good thing that the students are diverse and that the students have to deal with that diversity. And it goes to the professors to also have to deal with it, and to see the professors being able to cope with the diversity. And it's almost as if students were not grown up. We're not mature. And that's part of college. We're becoming mature and growing up really fast. And to see professors dealing with that diversity is good for students, because once we see you guys doing it, we lead by example. So, yeah.
I feel that for all professors, not just those coming from different countries or what is considered to be a minority group, we all have to be aware of where we're coming from and our background. But I also think it's highly valuable to have a diverse faculty and diverse people here, because, as I may have stated previously, putting a human face to an experience is more effective than simply having generalizations about these people, those people. And as in my personal life, I see a lot of people from different cultures. I find it invaluable to learn from them and from their experiences, even if it is difficult to listen to them sometimes because I disagree to such an extent.
Thank you.
We are approaching the witching hour, but I would like to offer Professor Clifford the last question.
Man, that's a lot of pressure. It's kind of a question and comment. One thing I'm continually struck with in my classes is that on a college campus, and I've been on other ones as well, we have students in our classes for whom this is the most diverse place they've ever been, whether you're looking at race, nationality, sexuality, whatever, and we have students for whom it's the least diverse place they've ever been. And the fun thing on college campuses is we throw them in dorm rooms and say, get along and be fine, and then we're surprised when that doesn't happen. But so I think it's important we keep in mind when we're teaching that we have that range. The day after the main night of the uprising in Baltimore, I had one of the key organizers of some of the peaceful protests, and I had a student in his National Guard uniform having to leave from class to go downtown to serve. So we have such a wide array, and so for students, what do you see faculty do that works with that array of, for the people for whom having anyone of a different race than theirs or a different political view is the most diverse place they've ever been, and you've got students who are well steeped in all kinds of diversity. What have you seen works for dealing with that kind of range within a classroom? Thank you.
I guess this stems specifically for diversity. I think it would be a good idea if professors haven't done this or are thinking about doing this, is just like being open to the fact that, you know, one student may be on one side of the spectrum, one student may not be, to have a leadway for the students who may not be, because those are the students who are going to be specifically affected to what's happening in the political sphere. And so I think having like something like a mental health day for students, just you can have, you know, 3 absences in the class, but have one day where a student can be absent for a mental health reason, and that mental health reason may be because they're depressed about what's happening outside of school, have anxiety, testing anxieties, something like that. And I think that that gives a good leeway for professors to not really show what side they are on specifically for a controversial topic, but to just have an open mind and show support in whether students may be on whatever spectrum that they are on. And I think it's a good idea to just have more to think about ways that they can introduce to their classrooms and students, introduce ways in which they can, or through which they can show support for students no matter, or without shutting other students out. And so I think that specifically being a minority student, it's important for me to see that professors are open and being a support system for students, no matter what their background may be. So, like I said, a mental health day or just having random extra credit assignments. I really love extra credit, y'all. And so I think that that's really important.
So this is my third university, and by far the most diverse campus I've ever been a part of. And I'm trying to put this into words, but since it is the most diverse university, when I came here, I had no idea the background of Towson. I had no idea how diverse it was. I came here for personal reasons. And when I showed up, I was actually surprised at how diverse it was, but it was inviting. And I think the professors are a big part of that. It was a welcoming place, even though I felt like a minority at first, and in a different way than the actual term minority. It was, I'm from the West Coast. I'm from Seattle, Washington, so I'm a long ways from home. But the professors made it an easy transition for me, and so I have never had an issue with diversity here. There was never any issues, and one of my first days I visited Towson before I came here as a student was during the Baltimore riots. I was at the Orioles game, and I was stuck in the stadium. And that was an eye-opener for me because I had never experienced anything like that. But seeing the campus, seeing Freedom Square and how involved all the students were, and seeing everybody involved was a good experience for me because it opened my eyes to what happens in the world. And the professors, I actually had 2 professors the following semester, and we had open discussions about that and how that impacts your life and how everybody sees it differently. And they were open to hear the discussions, and I thoroughly enjoyed those. And it impacted me, and I will always remember those discussions. And that's one thing I really enjoy about Towson is the diversity, because it's something I will never experience, especially since I'm going to go back to the West Coast once I'm done with school here. I will never experience diversity like I have here. That's just where I'm from. It's something you can't experience. So I think the professors here handle that really well. If you guys want to throw in some extra credit, I'm all game for that. But to answer your question, I think professors already handle diversity really well at this university, and I don't see much they can change.
I would have to concur with him that the professors at this university do handle things well. In a classroom setting, I think it facilitates diversity by the pure fact that diverse people are sitting next to each other and having to interact and possibly having to work together on projects, and perhaps finding a mutual enemy. It's some concept that everyone can agree upon that this is wrong, and let's work from there. Let's basically find anything to agree upon, and then let's actually talk. Because once you've agreed on something, then you're together to a certain extent.
For fear of becoming everyone's mutual enemy, it's time to bring this to a close.
Oh.
Won't you please thank me along with each of you for the great efforts of our 3 panelists.